Good evening. Welcome to the 1873 TV. The topic is the future I want. Talk to the world with me on the link between the rule of law and prosperity. Do you think there is a link or ought to be a link between the rule of law and prosperity? I think we have been talking about the rule of law. What does it mean to have the rule of law in most of these developing states? Good evening. How are you? I like your hairstyle. Thank you. We are back again. Kuda, do you think there is a link between the rule of law and the rule of law and prosperity? What do we mean by the rule of law? Constitutionalism. Because sometimes we talk about people and fail to talk about the ingredients that are necessary to build the future that we all think we need. How do we build enduring societies without the foundation of those societies? What is the rule of law? What do we need to secure it? Any taker for that? Hi, Gumi Remseve. Would you want to take a plunge on the topic of the day? So today we said we're going to talk about the SMM story. And here we are. I'm posting the Reconstruction Act so that we can look at it and possibly have a conversation on what kind of government do you think we need in order to secure the future that we think is worthy of speaking to what kind of Zimbabwe we all dream of for ourselves and for the people who will come after us. So I'll pin that. You can download the link, or you can go on the website. You can actually Google this act. It's called the Reconstruction of State Indebted Insolvent Companies Act. And I recognize, pardon, Matenga, welcome. I recognize Antonio Muvunde. Okay, good evening, Mr. Mawere. It's unfortunate that I was not able to be part of the previous discussion. As I was back playing it, I got a notification that you were back online. I hope to catch up as we go. I hope I won't be taking you guys back to what has already been dealt with in the previous discussion. Itai Stole, welcome. Tatenda Nyamadzao, welcome. So I'll just open the reconstruction of State Indebted Insolvent Companies Act. If we look at Mugabe and we're trying to understand his mind, and so that we all are privileged to think like him before we act. We have seen the dramas taking place. We are trying to interpret the events of today. What is taking place in Zimbabwe? We don't have the prism to know exactly who is who in the zoo, who is doing what, for what purpose. Ordinarily, we assume that there are baskets. One basket could be called G40, another basket would be called Lacoste. These are baskets that we've created. But when you look at human behavior, you soon realize that each one of us is actually independent. And nobody is able to know what another person thinks. It's only actions that will then expose the thought behind the action. Because when you look at it, murder, somebody is thinking of killing you. Some may never actually kill you. The only time we call you a murderer is when you actually do it. So in life, you actually would never know what thoughts cross in someone's mind. Some of those thoughts are never executed, and therefore we'll never know what is it that inspires somebody. So when I look at a law, imagine somebody were to pass a law that in the highway, the speed limit should be 30 kilometers per hour. First, that law itself must be able to address an understandable human problem. So those who are required to obey it must know what it is meant to achieve. But laws that have no general purpose, those laws ordinarily should never have a life. Because when you say 30 kilometers per hour, can you imagine the traffic jam that will be on that highway? So that law itself ceases to be a law of general application because I can't apply it. So we look at lawmaking. We look at the executive branch of government. We look at the judiciary. Why are these branches of government separated? In practice, in most of our societies or our countries, is it the case that there is a separation of powers? That the judiciary is independent of the executive? Yet the people who assume the positions of judges are appointed by the very people that are daily called corrupt. So how do we balance this promise of checks and balances with the reality of it? Here we have a law which I'm going to read for you so that we all are talking. It's called Reconstruction of State Indebted Insolvent Companies Act. Just bear in mind that in 2004, there was no law providing for what they needed to do in order to make SMM a company that fell within the ambit of government. Because ordinarily, any company in any jurisdiction is governed in terms of the Companies Act. That act provides for the creation of a company, the operations of a company. And this is what it should be. That for a company to exist, it must be a creature of law. If there is no law that provides for it, then the company itself cannot exist. It also says a company is an association. A company is incorporated, is given a birth certificate like a human being. The control and management of a company is vested in the board. The shareholders are issued shares, and their liability is limited in most cases. If it's a limited liability company, it means my liability or risk of loss is limited to the share, to the value of the shares I've subscribed in the company. So it is the company that issues shares. So this law was given life after events that took place without the law in place. So I discover that actually I don't have the legal instruments to place you within the ambit of the mischief I want to meet against you. What do? I borrow powers reserved for the president to deal with emergencies. So this act, if you are looking at it, I think it says the act in bold letters. It says to provide for the reconstruction of state. Perhaps I can, let me see whether I can just copy that and paste it so that we can read it together. Okay, this is the preamble of the Act. There it is. So I see there was another comment that I may need to attend to. Lord Mutumwa Mawere was seen at Kushungo Dairies. Mnangagwa was involved in SMM takeover from Tuma. And now Amai has pulled the plug. It makes sense now. Actually, I've never been to Kushungo Dairies in my life, Lord Mo. Perhaps you can help me. I don't even know what the dairies look like. If you're fact, please tell us, when was I at Kushungo Dairies? Where I was the orphanage. That's where I visited the orphanage in Mazoe. I think it's some 3-4 years ago. And I am not too sure what you are trying to connect, if it's connection at all. So if you have some facts, I think put it to the fore, because if I was there, there's no need to deny it. Even if I was there, I don't see how somebody's actions, how I could have predicted the events that took place last week to make the vice president leave the country. Hello? Hello? Okay. So I was just going through the Reconstruction Act. It says to provide for the reconstruction of state-indebted companies. I've gone through it before. First, it provides for reconstruction of a company that is called state-indebted company. Have you ever heard of a human being called a disabled human being? Either you're a human being or you're not. Yet in this case, a new category of a company or companies is created by law that says state indebted. So if one is indebted to the state, automatically the state no longer is afforded the same rights that any other individual is afforded. And people talk about the equality before the law. That whether you are a state or you are no state, then it doesn't matter. You are afforded the same rights in terms of the law. Whether you are a creditor or you are a debtor, you all appear before the court wearing the same rights. The perpetrator and the victim, you all have the same rights. In this case, the state, whatever it means, the idea of creating a state as an interested party itself must worry somebody. It comes from what John Enrique is talking about, communism. The idea that government can be a party, an interested party, a human being with the same rights as a natural person. That idea alone, that the state is senior. So we have Jerry, Mutumwa Mawere, your hairstyle mirrors that of Kim Jong-un. Hey, the rocket man. I guess now I am King Jong-un for the purpose of Jerry. I hope it changes your day and makes you somebody that you are not. I think that's fine. The connection is that people are saying you are G40 from your presentation. You said you were last in Zim around 1987. Which is your relationship? What is your relationship with Grace Mugabe? Again, there are people who are so preoccupied, not with ideas, but with relationships, as if that advances any scholarship. But the death of scholarship always is closer to the day when people actually fail to think and want to reduce other people to be connected. So if my mother is a murderer, I guess to Taduashe, I'm also a murderer. If my father is a thief, then I must also be a thief. If we come from the same house, then certainly we must have the same mind. If I'm seen with you, then certainly there must be something untoward about that. This is the tragedy of the times that we live in, that seemingly enlightened people would use the rear view mirror to judge the present day, not knowing that each day, each hour, each second, each minute, each nanosecond is as new to all of us as anything else. Although 1 minute follows another minute, 1 second follows another second, the second that I have not consumed, I cannot say is determined by the second that I have consumed. If that was understood in its proper context, I hope Tadiwashe Chisenke would learn something from what I am saying. I am not related to Grace Mugabe. Grace Mugabe is the wife of Robert Mugabe, and has been as such. She has her own story to tell. I have my own story to tell. I have my own mind, she's got her own mind. What she decides to do, when and how, that's her prerogative. I have no interest at all, nor have I been consulted about anything. All I'm sharing with you are facts that are known to me. I've given you the facts, but clearly you seem to be diversionary and you seek to distort whatever you think is the relationship. For what reason? I think it will become clear in your own mind, at your own time, to reflect on what it is that you want. What kind of future do you want? A future full of ghosts of yesterday and what could have been done, which has not been done, or to learn from those who have experienced, so that where lessons are known about where the perimeter, where the circumference of government should be or should not be, we know. And we know what our responsibilities as citizens should be and ought to be. You only give us your vision. Why don't we invite Chinamasa and Mnangagwa to respond? The last 18 years, they could have responded. If you can get them to respond. In fact, somebody asked Mnangagwa a few weeks ago, the tape was played earlier, to say, do you see a link between wealth and poverty and rule of law? And he said, no. Zimbabwe is a clean country. It observes the rule of law. It's a constitutional state. And the government has a legitimacy. And that legitimacy flows directly from the will of the people. And for the last 38 years, ZANU-PF has never cheated any election. They won the election free and fair. That is the reality that they express. If you can get Chinamasa, that's what we are provoking. To say, you now say to Chinamasa, Chinamasa, talk to me. What is a state-indebted company? What kind of company is that? A company ought to be a company. A human being ought to be a human being. A human being cannot be G40, because G40 itself is a human construct. It's people who give labels to other people for reasons best known to themselves. So how can a label be relevant? Imagine I go to McDonald's and I say, I want a cheeseburger. Then I expect to eat McDonald's, not bread, not beef, not lettuce, not tomato, not mayonnaise. I want the McDonald's because I want McDonald's because I want it to exist. Then you say, you are now McDonald's. You ate McDonald's. I was McDonald's. I tell you, no. I didn't eat McDonald's What I ate was bread, potatoes, cut into some form. And what I ate was a strip of a burger, a beef, not McDonald's. And that beef came from a cow, not McDonald's. The bread came from a farmer, converted into this form. There is nothing McDonald's in McDonald's. Would you expect people like Tatuashe to believe me? Accept that you ate McDonald's, you fool. Why are you spending time talking to us about all these complicated things? That's what Chizenga would say. Because to him, G40 exists. Yes. First lady, if you are seen with her, then you've already penetrated her mind. I could be sitting with you, Chizenga. Doesn't mean that I know who you are and what you are thinking. Tatuashe Chizenga, what were you doing at the orphanage? Can you shed more light? Yes, I guess you don't want to talk about what we are talking about, but let's get to it. In 1997, I hosted, together with others, a dinner where President Mugabe and President Mandela were invited in South Africa, where we were promoting the idea of building a diaspora community to invest in Zimbabwe. And what I did say to President Mandela then, that we have this idea called non-resident Zimbabweans, that people are trained in Zimbabwe, they grow up in Zimbabwe, they are harvested in South Africa with their skills. Zimbabwe is poor for it because that investment is not going back into Zimbabwe. So we wanted to do that. So pardon, I hear you. I'll just answer this one so that I think it's important also to address some of these foundational issues because they tend to distract. Because Tatuashe generally believes that I owe him an explanation as to whether I go to an orphanage or not. So in 1987, we did host a dinner. Both President Mugabe and his wife, President Mandela, did come to the dinner. It was a public event. And it was to celebrate the contribution of people of Zimbabwean heritage to the building of a South African economy. That was the message. Then President Mugabe did ask me to assist his own wife to raise money for the orphanage school that she wanted to build. And I said, as long as the orphanage does impact on children, we would assist. So I assisted in the raising of money, in building the foundation of a trust that was then used to raise money from other parties as well. So when I visited Zimbabwe, I think it was in 2013, the First Lady, I was in Zimbabwe, she asked me to see the school or what the money was used for. And that the money, together with other people's money, had produced an orphanage. And that's why I went there, to witness for myself that the money that we had advanced had been used for the purpose for which it was intended. Even when you send your boys to speak with Mawere to respond to the takeover of SMM, he referred to you and the people involved that it was Mnanga Gwachinamasa. Your presentation is subjective, not objective. In You are saying to speak to my boys now. I got boys. Respect other people, Tadwash. Respect them because they are human beings like you and me. Your prison is subjective, not objective. Invite relevant people to answer. You can do that. I can only share what I know and ignite those who know something else to share what they know. It's not for me to speak on behalf of Chinamasa or Mutumwa Mawere. They can speak for themselves, as they should. If there are any facts that relate to them, no doubt they will impact on those facts. That was so. Where does you and Chivayo come in as you're together? Chivayo was introduced to me by the late John Ngomo, the vice president, then the late vice president of Zimbabwe, and said he was he apparently related to John Ngomo. So that's how I got to know of Wicknell Chivayo, Wicknell. And when I got a call to visit the orphanage, I was staying at the Mikus Hotel, and Wicknell offered to give me a lift to the orphanage. He didn't know the first lady. So we went there. There were three of us. We had gone to Zimbabwe for the parliamentary hearing of the SMM matter in the committee that was chaired by the former member of parliament, Chindori Chininga. So that's what took us to Zimbabwe. So he gave us a right to go to Mazowe, and that's what happened. Nothing sinister took place. So I think, as Pardon said, Tadiwashe, if you want to pursue that line, you are fairly entitled to do so, but it adds nothing to what we are discussing here about matters of state. Whether I did go to an orphanage, the orphanage is not a government school. First Lady has no government position. And this is private funds that were used to develop a school. Does the school exist? Yes. Was the money used for the purpose for which it was intended? Yes. The rest I cannot speak beyond what I know. But what I did go to see was to see the evidence of this, and I did so. Mr. Mawere, avoid these fun questions by Tadu, and let's delve into the main topic of the night. Tendai Choto, thank you very much. So let's read it, and then Tendai, I think you may be able to. Okay. Toko Mango, welcome. Joe White, welcome. Brian Secure, welcome. Tadwashe. So it's inconvenient that Shiva is ZANU-PF runner. I don't know what the ZANU-PF runner is. And if it's a ZANU-PF runner, then let him run when he needs to run and your hands are clean. We should know, how do you know that is a private fund? I'm saying the funds that I used to assist the orphanage were private. They were not public funds. So that's the only limit. So the school was built, and I went to see the school. That ought to finish. Let's go to what the subject of the day. So, Tendai, I think you will agree with me, and pardon, that a company is a company and ought to be a company. It's a juristic person that is created in terms of the law. If you don't agree and you are watching, please tell me so. Then it says, and associate companies, the act sought to create a new category of companies called an associate. But normally, all the company affairs are embodied in the Companies Act, which is a company that applies to everybody There is no selective application of the law. Cletus Nyamweda, how do you know Tapiwa? Tapiwa Matanga, the Tapiwa Matanga, they used to work for some of the companies under the SMM banner. So, but I think, Cletus, let's focus on the subject. This is the distraction that if you want to ask any question, you can inbox me. But let's try to focus and start and finish. Mr. Mike, can I have your contact? We once met at University of Johannesburg. Okay, again, if you want anything else, please do so. And Munashe Trust, you know what, guys, Zimbabwe is rich, but problem now is the problem now. So we keep on being dragged back and forth. Munashe Trust, for this, no true in Zimbabwe, pray for these Zimbabwe guys. Elliot Banfa, true. Tadiwasha, the subject of the day is the future I want, and I should know who and when and whom I'm speaking. You need disciples to follow, not people who want to know the truth. I don't need any disciples because they serve no purpose to me. And Tadiwasha, you may need disciples, but I have no need for them. But giving up my time, surely it must be used so that it's common to all, not to be preoccupied with Tadiwasha. Because if you are going to be the reason why we're talking, we can go offline and talk. There's nothing. Let's be organized, not agonize over simple things. Pardon, true, it is with rights to sue and to be sued. What I'm asking, pardon, have you ever heard of a creature called state-indebted company in your life? And what would that mean to you if someone told you that I met a character that was described as a state-indebted company? What would that company be? Would it be a legal structure? Or would it be a dummy? So pardon, since I'm talking to you, you can also fast pace your responses so that we can have a conversation. Gondu gives that the rule of law provides consistency and in the process, prosperity. The rule of law is just laws. It doesn't provide for anything. It is us who have to do the work. The law does not suffer the burden of doing anything. It is our responsibility to do what we have to do in our interest. The question I've asked to pardon and all of you is whether you have heard of this creature introduced in this act called state-indebted company. Okay, pardon says, no, it's my first time of setting my eyes on this act, on the act. That's fine. So I think if the first time, it may also be a first time for other people. If it is your first time to know of the existence of this act, please say so. Gundu gives that yes. You are now ignoring my comments, then you claim to be democratic. Tadiwasha, I don't know whether your understanding of democracy is shared. To be a nuisance is not democracy. To be diversionary is not democracy. Democracy requires majority rule. Don't become a single majority. Okay, Fafi says, I've not had the opportunity to read the act and I did not know about it. But now are you looking at it? Have you downloaded it, Fafi? Pardon says, I haven't heard of it. Welcome, Samuel Maramba. So those who have not read it and are looking at it, can we confirm that we are indeed looking at the act? Because there are some people who are in this conversation just for the purpose of advancing their own agendas or their own end games, not for the purpose of acquainting themselves with some of the absurdities that have now become characteristic of the Zimbabwe that we live in. I have the links there, and I was hoping to read it before 8 p.m. I guess in the UK it's not 8 p.m. And I've shared the link, but I'll do so again. I think you can go. I think it was 8 p.m. South African time, not 8 p.m. UK time. I said Central African time, I think 5. Gundu Gidza, go on Google, search for Reconstruction of State Indebted Insolvent Companies Act. I go again, reconstruction. I'll type it on the so that you don't have to suffer the burden of. It's called the reconstruction. I've typed it so you can just take and search. And I think then we can be looking at the same document. So if you are looking at the document, tell me. So tell me if you found it or you failed to find it. Because it's important that we are reading from the same text. Okay, Tendai says a good friend of mine, Wilson Banda, has just joined us. Welcome, Wilson. And we are here trying to really imagine or reimagine the kind of Zimbabwe I want to play. Understanding that the First Lady is not Zimbabwe, that Zimbabwe is a human construct. It has a constitution. And that constitution sets out the framework within which government is established, office bearers take their roles, and also how it is supposed to function. And what are laws? And what should be the minimum in terms of getting an idea into law? And the morality of ideas is founded in laws. The mischief of ideas is founded in motion when something is being implemented. If I hold in me a crazy idea and I do nothing about it, it will never be crazy to somebody else because you actually don't know. Because we have a big mind. Sometimes we use 1% of it, even less than 1% of it. But this percentage that we use, some of it reflects ideas that were never given expression in terms of actions. Some were ignored. Some books were never written. People saying, I'll write tomorrow until they die. So even what we are doing today, other people would not see the significance of it. That we are all here today in this age of our civilization, where we are all connected. Some may be in distant shores, Imagine 20 years ago, would this have been possible? That we can create an arena where we can actually talk to each other, understand each other, yet in us, there will be some rotten apples who want the world to go back to what it was, where we have private circles instead of public squares. So this is a public square where there is an act. This act is called the Reconstruction of State Indebted Insolvent Companies Act. What does this mean to you and me? When somebody say reconstruction of State Indebted Insolvent Companies Act, what does it mean? So Tatuashe still is on his crusade. I think the best is to ignore him. So have you managed to see the act? Those who have seen the act, please tell me so that we can go through with it. Okay, Stanley, have you managed to locate the act? You got it, Gundu, yeah. So when you look at the preamble, it tells you the mischief in it. Because do you agree that all companies must have enjoyed the same rights at law? You can't have one company with different rights, another company with other rights. Do you agree that the doctrine of equality before the law precludes the separation of companies into state or non-state? That each company must enjoy same rights, equal rights before the law. If I owe money to a company, the same rules must apply. Whether you are a big creditor or a small creditor, that no creditor must enjoy preferential treatment as a doctrine of building the society that you want to see. Are we all together on that? That the moment you have a society in which one individual is given high heels and others walk on their feet, there is something wrong in that society. Are we together on that? That there can never be any justification in a constitutional state where one individual is accorded superior rights just because you happen to be connected to government. This act is founded on the opposite idea. It's founded on the idea that the government is a superior person. And in relation to a debtor, that if you owe money to any government institution, then the government is given a special law that doesn't apply to everybody else. Only Mushandi says, yes, a society should continue with uniform rules to prevent fraudulent acts. Before even we talk about fraud, do you agree that the basics of any society is the foundation that human life is not divisible? I cannot have a black inferior life, a white superior life, and we happen to be same people of flesh with the same blood. That apartheid or colonialism or slavery was founded on an idea that offends. The doctrine of equality founded in nature, that we are all by nature equally created, but equally free and independent. That a human being can never be reduced to a fraction of another, or even to be called G40. That idea of grouping people is offensive to the laws of nature. That the laws of nature gives us equal rights, and those rights cannot be tempered, cannot be divisible, cannot be fractionalized. Do you agree, Oli? That is a basic foundation. If we look at the human society that we enter without applying to be it, we are just born into it, grow into it, negotiate in it, and live through it without any basic compass or guide as how to live it, or where I would know what happens today and what happens tomorrow. And I would be the truth, the future would be revealed to me. So if we agree, we are talking about the reconstruction of State Indebted Insolvent Companies Act and the political morality that it informs. And Jonathan, that's what we are talking about. Todin Morris Mbiri, I wanted to know more regarding dual citizenship, but this is not what we are talking about today. Yes, Jonathan, it may appear to you as a philosophy class. We just have been talking about the reconstruction. Have you got a copy of yours? Just to look at an act is not philosophy. It's to look at the laws that exist in Zimbabwe and for you to determine whether these laws belong to a class of laws that you would want to see in the Zimbabwe of your dreams. If you believe it's philosophy, you are entitled to withdraw yourself from it. You don't even have to tell us. So we are trying to advance arguments that will then take us to another destination where we know what kind of Zimbabwe we must have, not what kind of leader should come out of us. Because we must know what should be done, what should be the values, should be the principles that should inform the building of a society that inspires all of us to be the best that we can, to work hard in the knowledge that what we are working for, it's ours, and we can harvest it. So that's what we are talking about. So for those who are interested in proceeding, obviously, let's do proceed. Those who have managed to get a copy of the act, please say so that I think we're talking about the whole philosophy around equality, which is a doctrine entrenched in any constitution, in the Bill of Rights, that if you have a company and you are a creditor, you must be treated like every other creditor. You must not have a special category of a creditor that Fafi says you got a copy. So when you look at it, just the title itself must either ignite something in you or must offend you or must inspire you. Before even you look at all the words, when you look at that title on its own and Google it and find any other country where this law exists, if it exists, then let's deal with it. Yeah, going to get this act was enacted in February 2005. What were the primary drivers necessitating this law? This law was specifically targeted at me, that everybody else, the law doesn't apply. It only applies to me. So pardon has done something extra, value added on this conversation. It's funny that if you type state indebted company on Google, it's only in Zimbabwe. That tells you something. That why would the whole world, the whole Anglo-Saxon, Judeo-Christian, Protestant civilization that informs these joint stock companies or limited liability companies, that whole political philosophy that has been put in practice for many, many, many years, even before Zimbabwe was established. There is no such law. Yet Mnangagwa was a minister of justice administering this law. At no stage did he find this law to be offensive to his own DNA, his own mental fabric. Yet this is the law that allowed the government, through the actors that know themselves. Some of the actors today are being considered in private minds as future presidents of the country. Would you want a president who gives life to this idea that the state or the government is a human being worthy of superior rights, not obligations? Would you want to be part of that civilization? Richard Munyam. Have you got a copy, Richard? We are not talking about most acts. We said, let's just look at one. It's not the only one. Let's have the discipline of reading. Let's have a discipline of step-by-step approach to issues so that we can all arrive at the same conclusion after sharing insights on facts, not fiction. So, Richard, I hear you, but some people didn't even know of the existence, let alone operation of a law of this nature. Let's give them the leeway. If you know many acts of a similar nature, Richard, let's reserve that for another day so that we finish what we started, or we leave halfway and we continue part 2, part 3 as we go along. So I hope you give us that indulgence. So we now know that this act is unique. This act was given life to by human beings like you and me. What could have been in their minds before it became even an act, before it went to parliament? What were the steps? Who was the genius who said, yes, this doesn't exist, it must be given life to? And was it done with ulterior motives? Was it done in the public interest, in the national interest, which is your interest? Those are the questions that you can begin to ask yourself. Who are the characters involved in this? And if you know them, and you know of the existence of this act, does it worry you, or you are indifferent? So it then says, these companies now, this special category of companies, so they must be unable to pay credits made to them from public funds. If I'm unable to pay, then obviously I'm unable to pay. That's the end of the story. If you're a creditor, you go to court. I have to defend myself. I'm presumed to be innocent. in respect of whose the state has issued any guarantee that has become due. To provide for appointment and functions of administrators of companies under reconstruction, that the Companies Act provides for circumstances in which the company can fail. There are procedures that apply to all companies. Why would you need this specific law to have a life when the Companies Act, the Insolvency Act, or Bankruptcy Act applies to everybody and is there for all? Why would you need another law that then takes a company from where it belongs, the Companies Act, and places this no man's land into this back room where no rules apply? Why would you do that? Unless you are up to mischief. And who are these people who would use government for what it's not intended for? Tendai Shoto, the act goes against the basic principles of property rights. I once came across the writings of a Peruvian economist, Hernando de Soto Pola, on the importance of business and property rights. Property rights are imperative to development. This Reconstruction Act truly seems personal. We are not there personal. This act still exists for your information. And Honorable Minister Bonyongwe is administering the same act. It's there. It has been alive for 12 years. And before that, it was a statutory instrument. So SMM affairs were governed in terms not of an act. This act only came after the fact, after the event. Ernest Kadembo, welcome. So we now read, to provide for formulation and implementation of schemes of reconstruction in respect of such companies, to amend the Prevention of Corruption Act. Have you ever heard this? That one act can amend another. If you have heard of this, please share with us. That I can pass an act, it amends another. Or that amendment must be contained in the act that you seek to amend. You can't use another act to amend another act, which means there will be a senior act and a junior act. Have you ever heard of laws where one is superior to the other, or each law stands on its own? That's a question for you. Is it, when you imagine Zimbabwe and you say, the kind of Zimbabwe that I want to see, would you want a Zimbabwe where one act of parliament would subordinate another or amend another without going to parliament to amend the law in question and justify why that amendment is called for and allow for debate? But you have an act of parliament already passed, in existence prior to this. Another law is passed. There is no reference to the act it seeks to amend. Have you ever heard of this? If you have, please share with us. Because we're trying to imagine a Zimbabwe and the characters who are in it, and whether G40 has ever commented on this, whether the First Lady has ever commented on this. If she knows this for certain, that one day this law can be used against Gushungu, do you think she will sleep and think tomorrow is secure and I must put my money in Zimbabwe where arbitrary rules can apply? Do you think she knows what we know? If you do, then confirm it with her. You may find that she doesn't know what you know. The president doesn't know what I know. But if I were to ask the president and say, President, You say you are a lawyer, which I have no doubt you may be, or you are, because it's irrelevant whether you are or not. But if indeed you are, then you do know some of the fundamental principles that should guide lawmaking. Tell me, can one act of state amend another act of state? And what will be required for that? And if you know a member of parliament that is in our midst or connected to you, let's ask them so that we can have better answers. So as we try to imagine a Zimbabwe that we have yet to visit, let's deal with the fundamental principles. So anyone who cares to answer on that, is there anyone who is interested in answering that side of it? Okay, we leave it for another day. So the title number 1, it says this act may be cited as the Reconstruction of State Indebted Insolvent Companies Act, date of commencement 25th February 2004. Although it's not the actual date of commencement, but that was the date that was provided for. But if you look at section 39, if you are with me, you see what it says. Let's just go to the end. So I still hope it's section 39. Okay, say section 38, sorry. It says, saving of powers exercised under statutory instrument 187 of 2004. I think everybody by now knows what an SI is, a statutory instrument. Every order made, that's number A. Number B, any action or a decision taken or done by the Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, or an administrator or assistant administrator in the valid exercise of any power in terms of the Presidential Powers Temporary Measures, Reconstruction of State Indebted Insolvent Companies Regulations, 2004, published in Statutory Instrument 187 of 2004, shall, notwithstanding any lapsing of those regulations, be deemed to have been validly made, taken, or done as the case may be in terms of this Act. Although the Act purports to commence operating in February, it then provides for that Act to apply for circumstances before it was given life to, and validates all actions that were done pursuant to an Act that didn't exist. Does that speak to your own sense of morality? If not, tell us. If yes, tell us. Then Bertram Tabet says, the statutes are there to serve the interests of the ruling party, ZANU-PF. I don't know where you are coming from, Bertrand. We are not talking about ZANU-PF. This is an act of state, not an act of party. Can we at least deal with what is there? Have you even gotten the link to the Act? Are you looking at the Act? Or you are talking in generality? The legislature serves the whims of the regime. What is the regime? We are dealing here with factual matters. Do you want us to talk about facts or to continue this tirade of speculation, superstition. Here we have an act that is given life in February 2005. But in the act itself, it actually applies before it was given life to. It provides for powers to be reserved to validate things that were done when the act was not in existence. Does that offend your sense of decency? Or it doesn't? If it does, tell us. If it doesn't, tell us as well. This is what it says. Anyone who cares to comment? Okay, so let's proceed. So we now know Section 38 actually. This act, it has an effective date, but is also given powers to apply retrospectively. Gundugeza, yes, this is that tells you that the House of Assembly is not a House of Assembly. Gundu. And we just went through the what? The act. It says Article 1. The act may be cited. It says the date of commencement. Actually, it says 25th of February, but that's not the date of commencement. The date of commencement is actually September 6, 2004. Then clause 2. This act shall apply to all state indebted companies, including those formed or incorporated before the date of commencement of this act, and regardless of when they became indebted to the state. Let me post it so that you can see it. Welcome, Taurai, so that you can see what they are saying. So read as well. Just read for yourself. Without a doubt, the promulgation of the act offends the decency of any fair-minded person. And I think, Bertram, you may agree that what is offensive to you, what is decent to you, need not be decent to another. But before today, did you know of this existence, the existence of this act, Bertram? Or this is your first time to know about it? So, please read what it says there. It says, this act shall apply to all state indebted companies, including those formed or incorporated before the commencement of this act, and regardless of when they became indebted to the state. Can somebody unpack this for us? This is the kind of Zimbabwe that you want to see. This law exists. And you've just gone through the application of the act. What would you say to this? Would you think you are safe or you are in danger? Would the existence of this act inspire you, ignite you to be a rebellious person, or ignite you to say, this is it. That's what we need in Zimbabwe. Any comment? Bertram says, I didn't know of the existence of this act. Thank you for your honesty. Personally, it ought to be repealed forthwith. But let's get back, Bertram, to something else. What would you say to the person with this mind that informed the existence of this act? Do you think that mind should remain in government? Because behind this act, there must be individuals who sat down, conspired, and said this is a proper role of the government, and proceeded to act as such. Bertram, take yourself to be a citizen of this country. What would come to mind when you now know what you didn't know? Would you say it's business as usual? Have you ever heard the president of the country talk about this act? Yes, we now know he doesn't accept people who are up to mischief, including Mnangagwa, or alleged mischief. So, Tendai Choto says that's a retrogressive. It's actually retrospective law. One of the tenets of rule of law is we cannot make a law which goes back to cover facts and circumstances that didn't exist. Laws are supposed to be progressive. I hope, Tendai, you got friends who are lawyers. Chigora Joe? No, not at all. The person who presided over the drafting and enactment of this act should never be in government. Thanks, Joe. Do you think it is important for us, like the First Lady has shown, to expose this mind, not this person alone, these persons, because it can't be one. This law has been in existence for 12 years. And Tsvangirai knew, because the inclusive government is within the 12 years. Mugabe knew of this law, or ought to have known. Chamisa knows. BT knows. Ought to have known. And all these people are silent. Huh? Tendai Choto, my thing is that the actors who formulated this act were both referee and player. Tendai, I'm asking, you are the owner of Zimbabwe. This act was given life because you authorized it by either voting or choosing not to vote. And these people work for you and me. Now that you know about the existence of this law, what are you saying about your government? If this law can exist, how many other laws of a similar nature exist? I'm the only one who is coming, giving up time to share what has existed for 12 years. Then Gundu Gedza said, inasmuch as this act has all the mechanics of an act of law, the arbitrary wording of it smacks of a witch hunt. Pardon, I think there is need to revisit the other laws that were made by these same people. And one of the persons is Mnangagwa. He's a lawyer. Secretary has been a Secretary for Legal Affairs, Secretary of Administration for the party, in government. He's a was a ranking member of the government for 38 years, 12 of which intersected with this act. In fact, 13 years. He saw no evil, had no evil, and pretended as if Zimbabwe was okay. What does Mnangagwa say about Zimbabwe? This is only a few weeks ago. What does he say?
Very good day to all of you. Firstly, I'd like to thank Mr. Anile Ndlovu for the opportunity to inviting myself and my organization to this forum. And I would like to thank the VP, Comrade Mnangagwa, and the other delegates that came from Zimbabwe. My name is Tinashe Mpasiri. I'm actually a presenter with the 1873 FM, an initiative of a member-based association network called the 1873 Network. So some of the questions that I have here are questions that I posed to Mr. Anile Ndlovu on a radio interview, but he could not answer them. He stated that the VP and his delegation will be able to answer them. So some of the listeners had these questions to ask. A gentleman once remarked that the opposite of poverty is not wealth, but it is the rule of law. So that being said, this listener stated, absent the rule of law, development is a mirage. What is your take on that? And the other question that was posed, why invest in a country where native-born persons are running away, or investors like Makamba can't even step in? And another question that I just got a few seconds ago, pertaining to ZACC, which is an institution that is addressing or trying to address this scourge called corruption. They asked whether ZACC is a partisan institution. Thank you.
Honorable Vice President, this speaker, Mr. Mpasiri, who angers a certain radio station, he had 3 questions. The first one, he was at pains to try to link the rule of law and economic development. That was his first one.
I'll do the first one first. He is correct. Where there is no rule of law, where there is no peace, where there is no order, development cannot thrive because there will be conflict. Fortunately, in our region, we have little spots of conflict here and there, but in the main, there is peace. In Zimbabwe, we are peaceful. We observe the rule of law in Zimbabwe. And what are tenets of the rule of law? Those who commit crime were arrested. And they go to courts, some get discharged, some are sentenced to prisons, and we have our prisons full with such people. Another tenet is that we must always submit ourselves as government to elections every 5 years, and that we have complied with for the last 38 years when we became independent. That's constitutionalism. We stick to that. In fact, this is why we went to war. We lost thousands, tens and tens of thousands of our brothers and sisters, the same as South Africa, for us to be where we are today, so that we have democracy in the country that is there. Yes, of course, we have constraints sometimes of implementing the ideals which we have as a result of resources and as a result of sanctions that have been imposed on us. But as I already said, we feel we should not be constrained by these sanctions by those who do not want to see Africa develop, those who do not want Africans to develop. So we are now saying we will rise, and we will rise together. No one will stop us from rising as a people.
Yes, the second question, Honorable Vice President, was this narrative. Why should we go and invest in a country whose natives are running away from?
The person is not aware why people are leaving Zimbabwe. Before 1999, no one was leaving Zimbabwe. We're happy, we're developing. But immediately we implemented land reform, and listen very carefully. We had a duty as the leadership to make sure that at the expiry of the Lancaster Constitution, where it had provisions that for the next 10 years, 10 years or so, we were not allowed to make legislation to acquire land. Anyway, to abide by that. In 1992, after the expiration of 10 years, I became Minister of Justice. And I was given the mission to bring legislation to appropriate land. So we married the land with their legitimate owners. And the legitimate owners, we married their land. And we did that. That offended those who were holding our land, the British colonial settlers in our country. That's the basis on which they imposed sanctions on us. Overnight, Mr. Shinamasa will be very articulate on that subject. Overnight, the lines of credit, balance of payments were cut by over 48% overnight. Projects which were running at the time came to a standstill. We lost jobs, we lost everything. There was attack on our currency and so on. So that was one of the reasons, or the major reason why people left the country. Now, if you say, why should we invest in a country? Those who still feel that they are afraid of coming into Zimbabwe, no one will be forced to come to Zimbabwe. We are appealing to those who have an understanding, who are patriotic, who think that although they are South Africans, Zimbabwe is part of them. They will come to Zimbabwe. It's a peaceful country. Their options are there. They will have returned their capital. So that is the answer I give you, my brother.
His other question, the last one from Yemse, was, is ZAC, the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, a practicing institution?
What?
A practicing institution, or is just there? Partisan.
Okay.
Partisan.
Now, how was it created? So that you can make your own judgmental conclusion whether it's partisan or not. In terms of our legislation, we advertise for persons to apply to become commissioners into ZAC. And we use our parliament to do the interview and the selection. So many people applied. I think we had over 56 people who want to be commissioners, but I think we only had 9 or 11. That was the number of commissioners. The process was done by parliament. And from those who applied, parliament selected the best from the applicants to constitute the commission. I don't know where partisanship comes in. But if it comes in, then if we identify it, we will deal with it. So far, we have not discovered the partisanship in it. It is an act which which administers, which guides the operations of ZAC in the country. And also, it is the act is also administered in the office of the president. And I don't believe that the president is partisan. He's the president of the whole country.
For the benefit of our listeners, can you briefly just tell us a little bit about yourself, the role?
So there you go. Chigora Joe says, you are right, Mr. Mawere. It's shocking to know that nobody challenged this law. It was challenged. But when the state is controlled, these people who controlled government made sure that no challenge would find expression in any court order. Then Bertram says the author of this heinous act should not be in government, as this act does not add any sense of well-being or security for the citizens of Zimbabwe or for corporations and businesses who are certainly at risk of persecution by this piece of legislation. That's the Zimbabwe that most people don't know. They actually think that Mnangagwa is guilty of deception, not guilty of giving life to a law of this nature. They think Chinamasa is an excellent jurist, excellent lawyer, excellent human being. But they don't know about this dark side of these characters. Do you think President Mugabe knows even about the existence of this law? Because if it can be offensive to you, should it not be offensive to him? And if he knows that for the last 18 years, actually this law has been operating under his control, under his oversight, under his watch, don't you think it would be an interesting conversation with President Mugabe? That if it had operated under your watch for 13 years, how many other things are happening and you don't know? Chigora Joe, no wonder why Grace kicked him in the face. Because he's stupid. He said he was given an assignment to put a law together to appropriate land, and he understands that as rule of law. But the reason Grace and Mnangagwa are at loggerheads have nothing to do with protection and promotion of the rule of law or the administration of justice. President Mugabe does not mention anything about undermining the rule of law. Does not mention anything that under your watch you never brought to cabinet to say, hey, one day is too many just to have this law exist. And I know of it. I know the people of Shawane have lost their jobs because of this act. I know Mawere has been affected by this act. I know several companies have been affected by this act. That consciousness is not there. So if Mnangagwa and Chinamasa could be this brazen, could this be courageous, how many other things have they done in the knowledge that they will never be exposed? Pardon says, but President Mugabe ought to have known. And he ought to have known that people were going to boo. Which means he ought to have to, he expressed himself that I didn't know. He may know about what he is told, but he may not know what you know. He may have been told, no, this act is akin to judicial management, and we want to restore the company that this rogue shareholder called Mawere has wrapped the company. But it's so interesting that this company is worth saving. So, Your Excellency, all we want is to put in place mechanism to protect the company. So, if that's the brief he got, you can imagine what his response is or would have been. Does a president know everything? So assume he doesn't, and now you know it from this conversation. What is it that can be done? There is a new minister who obviously won't be under because they protect each other. Although Mnangagwa is out, he still has friends. Chinamasa is still in government. He's still the Secretary for Legal Affairs in ZANU-PF. Do you think Chinamasa would allow or even encourage junior ministers to come sniffing as if they're dogs on behalf of Mugabe to expose them so they can face the full wrath of the law? Do you really think that these people who can do something like this and keep it alive for 13 years, do you think that they will just let it go and be exposed willy-nilly? Because this has implications. Have you ever heard the president talk about SMM, being proud of it, that this is what we did? If he's silent, have you ever heard any of the G40 fight for this? Yeah, Gundu Giza said the president ought to have known. Yes, ought to have known. That's what we expect every human being ought to have known. Bills of law are assented by the president, yes. But what if he is not doing his job? What if the president actually is not checking anything and he doesn't know what he signs? Because there are many things that he has to sign and give life to, and the people keep him busy. So when they bring the papers, they bring a brick of papers and they just show him where to sign. What if the reality of power is not what we actually think we know? Do we know actually how decisions are made? Because if President Mugabe was a protector of the Constitution, surely he would have known before this heinous act was given life to. Don't you think so? If this thing can last 13 years and he doesn't know, would that worry you, Gundu? Would that worry you that the person you have elected, who wants to be elected next year, actually does not know? Now we have come to the crux of the matter. We have an incompetent president. Yes. Now that you know that there is incompetence, does it therefore mean that the president is not competent if this act was hidden from him for 13 years? Pardon, no bill, no action will have life without the president assenting to it. So how many other things is he assenting to? Is he giving life to that undermine the very constitution that he takes an oath to uphold? How many, if we go to the president and say, President, you have betrayed our trust, he says, why? I said, for 13 years. And how many elections have you gone through? And the voters don't actually know. You still want to have another 5 years of this same old story. Your Excellency, Who are you doing this for? Why do you want to be in government when being in government allows mischief in your name? And when people say you must go, they have reason to say you must go. Because this law could not have been part of the independence promise. Surely it can't. It never can be. That a law of this nature exists and is given life to. Even Ian Smith was not a genius enough to create this kind of absurdity. And this is a black person who is on the other side of the supply chain of injustice. President, talk to us. This is not about Mnangagwa. It's about the government of Zimbabwe. It's not about ZANU-PF. It's about the government of Zimbabwe. That no minister, even Chinamasa, these powers he was given by you, Your Excellency. When I say excellence, I mean you must be excellent. But if the excellence is no longer there, who are you? Whose interests are you serving? The ministers? The public interest? Let's have that conversation. Let's organize ourselves to say, like the interfaith rallies, they're not talking about the rule of law. They're talking of one center of power. And that center of power produces this kind of laws. Does the center hold? One may ask. And these are the kind of missing conversations that we don't hear about. We hear about this or that, not about the Republic of Zimbabwe. That republic belongs to all of us. ZANU-PF belongs to only its members. If you are not a member, you have no reason to cry foul, because you still have the power to stop them at the national election. But how many of the people who are voting, who are angry with their current state, know that all this, part of it, is not about sanctions? You had Mnangagwa. What is Mnangagwa talking about? He was talking about sanctions. Everything has to do with sanctions. He is asked a simple question. He can't answer the question. He defaults to the usual mantra. We are under sanctions. Is that fair and just for a seasoned government actor to play games with other people? Come and invest. We respect the rule of law. We have had elections, but we have stolen companies. And we can still steal them because we have provided for it. Huh? So do you really think? I cannot answer about does the election work, Baba? Let's be fair. What works is for us to take what we know. And like the First Lady made sure that all these interfaces were building blocks to a crescendo where she knew where she was going. And I don't believe she's delusionary. She would pursue a road that doesn't end up with an end game. There must be a destination. The question is, if the government and the promise of independence is being undermined under President Mugabe's watch, if he knows that is happening and he condones it, then I'm sure you will agree that there is no legal reason for him and any moral reason for him to go for an election to do what? To have a repetition multiply from 13 years, you add more 5 years? I don't think he would agree to be a president of the republic, and he knows fully well. These people have been up to no good. Remember, Shinamaso, when he was AG, deliberately failed to interpret the people's views during the 2000 referendum. So I'm saying, we may think that they've been going, but how much do you think, are we confident that the president knows what is happening under his watch? Let's take one example. If SMM, it is a person, it is me, to provide the facts. The act has existed, but Chigora, did you know about the act before today? Joe, did you know about the act? I know, pardon, you said you didn't know about it. Let's just check whether Chigora knew about the act. Did you know about the existence of the act? I did not know about the act. Thank you. Do you think we have not even gone through the clauses of the act just to see how diabolical it is? Do you think President Mugabe knows the full extent of the abuse that is taking place under his name? Whether they call it Lacoste, they call it G40. Do you think he knows? Or we have assumed that he ought to know, but they have never tested whether actually he knows. If he has constructive knowledge, let's say we package this and we just go with the act. And we say, the future that I want, that's our group. Talk to the world about this law. President, we want to talk to you about this act. Do you know, can a law apply retrospectively? Chigora says, I don't think he knows. I don't think he knows, because if he knows, he would never go out and boast and say, my government is clean. My government, that even to appoint a successor is unconstitutional. It's illegal when he knows that his own administration is giving life to illegality, to unconstitutionalism, to abuse of state power. If he knows that, I don't think he will be confident that actually he needs to be in power. The law is called the Reconstruction of State Indebted Insolvent Companies Act. So that is the law. You can search for it. You can find it. And let's just hear President Mugabe so that we can close.
to stand for elections. They want me to stand for elections everywhere in the party, and it's their voice I heed and the voice of no one else. Of course, if I feel that I can't do it anymore, I'll say so to my party so that they relieve me. But for now, I think I can't say so. And even if I might feel I wanted to rest, but with, that volume of wishes for the president to stand, the number of people who would be disappointed is galore, and I don't want to disappoint them.
And are you now thinking of grooming a successor?
No. That doesn't suggest grooming a successor. A successor is groomed by the people, actually. That the majority of the people feel that there is no replacement, actually. No successor who, to them, acceptable as I am. But the people, would want to judge everyone else. Those around you can get the confidence of the people as they operate around you and gain the confidence of the people. When the people see that their leaders, they can trust their leaders beyond corruption, their leaders knowledgeable, sure, that's a grooming, I mean. The call to step down must come from my party, my party at Congress, my party Central Committee. I'll step down.
So that's President Mugabe. He has said this over and over again, but sometimes we don't hear him. So here we are, Chigora, Tendai, and everybody else. Gondo Giza, this is just it. We have the institutions in place to ensure that laws are passed that can stand up to the constitution of land. However, there is gross incompetence on every level of administration. If we had members of parliament competent enough to subject bills presented before them in parliament to the necessary scrutiny, then this kind of laws will not see the light of day. That's it. Pardon, was SMM insolvent? If it was insolvent, pardon, do you need a new law? If it was insolvent, it would be bona fide creditors who will apply for its liquidation. Insolvency is actually a court test. I cannot declare a company insolvent. Either the directors of the company, in consultation with their shareholders, can file for winding up, or I have to go to the court. Why would government be involved in the insolvency of a company? What would be the role of government there? There is absolutely no role. How would the Minister of Justice, for goodness sake, be the one to determine whether a company is insolvent or not? What is the role of a Minister of Justice? Is it to administer companies? To understand companies' affairs? Wouldn't you find it strange that the administration of companies is in terms of the Companies Act? All of a sudden, the company is removed from the Department of Trade and Industry or whatever into the Department of Justice. And the Minister of Justice would know that the company is unable to pay its debts. He's not a director of the company. He's not a shareholder of the company. He's not an officer of the company. How would he know that? for him to even issue an order. Where would the facts go into his office? How would they go? What legs would they use to get into the office of a Minister of Justice? If that happens, if you ask President Mugabe, tell me, what are the functions of a Minister of Justice? And what kind of information does he require to administer that department? Would that include determining solvency of a company or companies? Then what is the role of the courts? So, Gund, this is the kind of thing that we need to be able to think. Chigora Jones, SMM was a private company. What was their interest in the company? Their interest in the company was to assume power, to rape the company, take the money so that they can finance their political projects in the name of reconstruction. If a company is insolvent, why wouldn't you allow the natural course to take its way? Why would you be so afraid that you would want to control a company that is insolvent anyway? Other companies, the government has no interest. Parastatals have been failing. Other companies have been liquidated. Then only this one, the government has an interest to protect it. Why? What would be the interest of the government? This law was the only vehicle for the government to get into the affairs of SMM. Absent this law, there was no way. It had its own board of directors. How would you remove the board of directors? They couldn't. So they found that there was no other way to achieve their ends except go the route they went. So, do we understand each other there? So, okay, it's 11 past 10. We've been at it for 2 hours. And if people like Mnangagwa are not supposed to be in government, they should all be fired. If you give life and you ruin the life of many, and you are the owner of the government, what would be your recommendation? To fire the person? Open a docket? To say you knew or to have known? President, what would you do to your president? What would you do? Knowing that there is nothing that can be given life to without his consent. And he did consent. So when he consented, what is it that he thought it was? And whether he's taken any steps to verify whether what he was told was correct or not. What if he was lied to? That the company was indebted to the state when it wasn't. So what would you do? Those are the kind of questions that we need to address. To pose the questions, allow people to think about it. I hope I've given you some work for today before we go into the nuts and bolts of the act, for you just to go through it on your own terms, so that when we meet tomorrow, we can actually continue the conversation until we reach a point where somebody is sufficiently pissed off, as I am. Then we can say, what should the next step be? Because it's our government. These powers are not private powers. The funds are not private funds. Surely, can we say that the president is not complicit? Should we say that he has no case to answer? Chigora Joe says no. He must be able to give us answers. The exercise to fight these people is a major operation because we cannot easily draw a line between those who is corrupt and who is not. Whatever it is, the exercise of public power must be your concern, pardon. And if you know that for this to be given life, someone had to lie, had to misrepresent facts. And the reason is, why would they need to misrepresent facts? If a company is not indebted, it's not indebted. That's the end of the story. If government has no interest in the company, that should be the end of the story. The question is, why? And why? And did the president at any stage ask why? Now that Mnangagwa is no longer in government, perhaps this is the time to ask the why. Why? And if they could do this to SMM, who else have they been doing this? You may discover that actually it's not just SMM. There are many other instances where public power was used for what it is not intended for. So on that score, anyone interested in continuing this line of thinking, some people may call it philosophy, some may call it abstract, some may call it irrelevant. What do you think? Tonight, have we added something to the stock of knowledge you have about your government and how your government has been operated? If the answer is yes, please just type why. Fafi says absolutely. Norman Masuka says yes. So if you are out there, Chigora, yes. Thank you, Mr. Mawere, for this disclosure. We'll continue to think on these things. These are the things which keep me awake. Pardon. Another why. Gundu, why? Koza Collins, yes. Pardon, Madanzi, yes. So I wish to thank you very much. And Bertrand says, thank you for such an excellent and exciting discourse. Again, I think together we can get to the bottom of this. Let's not allow emotions to move us. Because you may find that Chiwoniso Rupere was a discussion about. I think, Chiwoniso, you'll have an opportunity to, if you are interested in it, it will be podcast on Zimbabwe Today, on Mutumwa Mawere Facebook page, so that you can begin to catch up where we left, what we did today, so that together tomorrow we can continue the discussion. The discussion, just in short, is about your government. It's about your future, Chiwoniso. It's about the future that you want. It's about you knowing better to act better. It's about you being an active citizen. It's about you showing up for your citizenship, for your love of Zimbabwe. It's really about responsibility, that when I know something, I must be curious enough to know everything about what I need to know about that thing. Once I know it, I must move to the next stage to act upon it. You never know what knowledge may bring. Some people may be ignorant. That's why they become stubborn. That's why they become arrogant. That's why they decide not to leave government, because they think they're actually serving you. They think they're anointed. They think they possess all the wisdom that is to be possessed by an individual. So we live in imperfect societies. We live in divided societies. We live in societies where power is not evenly distributed, where some people appear to have more of it and others not a lot of it. And yet, we got the power. We possess it. Let's democratize democracy. And there is no better weapon for democratization than literacy, than knowledge. When we know better, we always be better citizens. We always be vigilant. But when we know nothing, Chiwoniso, we always ask somebody, what is it about? And we say, ask not what Zimbabwe can do for you, but what you can do for yourself in the name of government. 13 farms to one family. Yes. Those are the questions. But they may argue with you that actually we are the liberators. What is 13 farms when land is available? Let's look at governmental power play. Let's focus on something. Like South Africa, what they did unique. The public protector says, I'm going to focus one thing on state capture. And I'm going to focus across the Limpopo on SMM. What are the features of SMM? Are there elements of state capture? If yes, when people can use government for their own personal interest, and you have evidence that supports that proposition, and one of the key or linchpin actors has now been thrown the red card, not for the reasons that you know should be the correct reasons, or the reasons that are valid. What would you do, Chiwoniso? Because Mnangagwa is saying, I've been fired because I've been betrayed by these minnows, wimps, parasites, cockroaches, chameleons. You never say he actually was in government one day too many. He ought to have divorced himself from government long time ago. And when we meet President Mugabe and ask him about these same facts, I know if he's a man, he will tell you, if what you're telling me is correct, that this law exists and has existed under my watch, I have a night to think about myself and the people of Zimbabwe. What is the intersection between them? But he's not squeaky clean himself. Yeah, but a person who is not squeaky clean, when they don't know that they are not squeaky clean, let's get the information with the eloquence that Chiwoniso you have. Let's put something that is so compelling, because he is a stickler of rules. Let's use the rule of law, not farms. We will have a tenuous argument about who is who. You may discover Bona has got a farm. The children have farms. Son-in-law is a farm. Yeah. Mugabe's stepson has got a farm. Let's use something where they cannot play mischief. Say, I didn't know, when you are compelled to know. So that's what we've been discussing. Tactics and strategies to secure the future that we want, not to waste it by being fragmented, ill-focused. So I hope, Chioniso, this is not about Mugabe. This is about the government of Zimbabwe. You have a vested interest in it, and many other people. And we have never found a way to communicate to President Mugabe that actually the problem starts and ends somewhere. And where is that address? Let's find it so that we can tell that person what time it is, so that they also can know what concerns us. Let's find the brilliant words, the eloquence. Let's read the act so that when we read it, we convert it like a Bible into verses, into chapters. And we say, not in my name, never in my name can government be used for the purpose for which it has been used and it is being used. Thank you very much.